So y'all know Genesis 1 is the creation story. So what is creation? What does that word mean? The dictionary says it's the act of bringing, it's the action of or process of bringing something into existence. So I work at Ford Motor Company. My process is we build trucks. We bring trucks into existence. We don't go in there and sit in a chair and think, okay, I want a red truck. And close my eyes and think real hard and there's a red truck. That's just not going to happen. I have to put hands on. Everything at Ford is hands on. Hebrew has a word bara, something from nothing. So you hear all the time when you're talking about creation or anything like that, people will ask, well, God had to do it. I said, okay, where did that come from? Who created that? Well, what are you talking about? Well, you're telling me there was stuff already there. Who did it? So we know that Genesis 1 is the framework, the arch you walk through for the rest of the Bible. And you'll see in a minute when I get in here, we'll see some things that I really didn't see before. The biblical creation narrative is a document of faith. And if anybody would read from Hebrews 11:3, I would appreciate it. I should ask that right up front. But Hebrews 11:3 will tell us about faith.
By faith we understand that the universe was formed in God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible.
Hebrews explains that pretty good, don't it? It was made out of God's hand. Nothing else. Nothing else was there. God did it on his own. We read.
I like the idea that he spoke it into existence. He said, let there be light.
So we see here, I'm going to read right straight from Genesis, in the beginning, and I'm reading from the ESV, English Standard Version. In the beginning, God created. Do you notice God created? God wasn't created. There's nothing there saying, sorry, God created. So in the beginning, God had created the heavens and the earth. The ESV says the earth was without what? Let me do this again. The earth was without form and void. That means there was nothing there. God was in darkness, and all this stuff he created. He created it all. And it says, darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. I want you to notice the Spirit. The Spirit. So we have God, we have the Spirit, and in the next verse we see somebody else. And God said, let there be light. Who's the light of the world? Jesus. So in the first 3 verses, we're going to see the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Holy Trinity in the first 3 verses. Now see, I would have never picked that out of here before until I started looking deeper. I've known all my life that verse, but I wouldn't have picked that out of it. But there it is. And once you notice it, it's kind of hard not to notice it. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit were there in the beginning. And let me see, I'm going to try to go somewhere here for a second, see if I can find it. But there's a verse that kind of says that, and it's in Job. Job 12, and I'm hoping that I'm right here, 7 through 10. Okay, this ain't it, but this will give you some more insight to things going on. It says, and this one right here says, but ask the beasts, they will teach you, tell you, teach you, tell you. Ask the birds, and they will tell you. Ask the bushes of the earth, and they will teach you. And the fish of the sea will declare to you, who among these do not know the hand of the Lord has done this. I was in a camp one time, and I had a couple deer come up on me. I was reading a book, Max Lucado book, and I was reading it, and I had went out to pray out in the woods, basically down a fire road. And so I read the book I was reading, finished the pages, and I said a prayer. I said, Amen. And I kid you not, the two deer just looked up at me, turned around, and walked off. That night at Devo, the man at Devo read these words. Reverence. God created. Reverence. There's no doubt who did it. It don't leave no room for discussion, really. God created the heavens and the earth and everything else. We can look in other places. I got a couple more verses we'll talk about in a minute. But my thing here is kind of being a little bit. Then in verse 3 of Genesis 1, God said, let there be light. There was light. And God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. Does that sound familiar in anything? Separating the light from the darkness? It's another one of those things when you read it, and you read it when you're studying, it kind of comes out different. God saw that the light was good. It doesn't say nothing about the darkness, though. Sorry, I'm trying to get that thing to silence. He called the light day, and the darkness night. And there was evening and morning. Doesn't that sound a little backwards? There was evening and morning of the first day. Now we can have a discussion about the day. So we've all heard, well, God created a day to God is 1,000 years, right? How many of us have heard that? All of us. So creation could have been 6,000 years. Anybody believe that? We see that, and light is very important in this verse. We're going to go to, if somebody would look up John 1, 1 through 3, 4, something like that, that'll be perfect. But light is mentioned 200 times in the Bible. So when something's over 200 times in the Bible, so when something's mentioned that many times, It means it's significant, doesn't it? It means that there's some meaning behind it. I believe this is the light is the thread that holds the rest of the Bible together. I don't know much about sewing. Lana knows a whole lot more about sewing than I do, but I do know that you put a knot in the end of the thread. When you pull it through, push it back through, it pulls the fabric together and holds it tight. That's what this does. It's the thread that holds everything else in the Bible together. Because if Genesis wasn't in our Bible, there's not much there. Because it starts right here. Starts right here in Genesis. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in Genesis. And without the Godhead, as it's called, why? We've talked about that before. If the crucifixion story is fake, then what are we doing here? It's pretty much the same way with this in Genesis. There's really no purpose because our purpose is in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. Our purpose for being here. This is where somebody get Genesis, John 1. Will you read it, Roger?
In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through Him, all things were made. Without Him, nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness was not.
So we get the Genesis story in John. In the beginning was the light. Right? Is that what it says?
It was the Word.
In the Word.
The Word was.
So here we go in John 1. You pretty much get what you get in Genesis 1. Again, it's the importance of the things that we read sometimes are sometimes we don't get that information to our brain, do we? Sometimes we read so quick, we go past it and don't see everything that we're trying to look at. I'm going to see if this is the other verse that I wanted here. This is Colossians 1, 15 through 17. He is the image of the invisible God, firstborn of all creation. For him, all things were created. The sun, the light, in heaven and on earth, visible, invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. So God had his son there. I don't want to be sacrilegious, but it was kind of like a dad making a toy train for his son. I'm making this for you, son. Because at some point, he's going to be here on earth with us, with humankind, walking the earth, as we see in the Chosen. If Jesus walked in here right now, what would happen? A lot of us would faint.
All of us would fall down and worship.
If we knew it was him. Some may get up and say, hey, you can't be here. You're not dressed right. You got dirty clothes and sandals on. You need to, go somewhere else. But we're told that where we're on this third rock from the sun was made holy for the Son. He was there. This is going to be for you. We get to day 2. And this is where I really had a lot of trouble. Day 2. And I picked out a Bible that would use the word that I needed, because you all have heard firmament, right? Well, the firmament, when I looked up the definition, it was like a dome. Has anybody ever seen the show The Dome? This dome drops down on traps these people, and they got to fight to get through. And so, it was a TV show a long time ago, but that's the first thing I thought of when I seen what the firmament was, a dome. Well, we don't live in a dome. The ESV uses, and God said, let there be an expanse. Now, expanse means space. And these are some really hard things to, this day 2 here is hard to understand, because he separates the water from the water in heaven or in the expanse from the other waters. Huh? But what do we notice when Jesus was doing what? What was he hovering over? He was hovering over the waters. So for the rest of creation to take place, you got to kind of separate them waters apart. You do have waters that have rain, other things, and waters on earth. We see in the next day, I'm going to go fast through this expanse because it really is, it's one of the things, they had so much stuff on what the expanse was. I said I could have done the whole class on the expanse. That's really not what I wanted to do. So that expanse was. Well, when I get to verse 3, we'll kind of read that a little bit and maybe answer your question. Because the expanse was the end of the second day. And it says, and God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear. He also said, he called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together, he called the seas, and God saw it was good. So I'm not sure where the waters were, but he gathered the waters on earth. Yeah. Under and above. Don't, yes. So now you got the water separated. Separated these waters out. Can you see what's taking place here? Because now the story is getting a little bit easier to follow. When I started reading some stuff. So you started out with the heavens and earth. You separated the water, the expanse. You Now you got the waters, you separated them so there's dry land. Who needs dry land?
Everybody but the fish.
Everybody but the fish. And we were kind of far away from that. So this story is starting to click. You see, we're here and now we're moving along.
Would the expanse not be our atmosphere?
From what I read, the expanse is space. That was one word that it said when I was looking at it. So
The firmament's more like our atmosphere.
No, I think it's the opposite way. Right. I think the firmament in common usage, literature and whatnot, when authors refer to the firmament, they're talking about space. They're talking about the heavens, the constellations, the stars. But the thing that separates Earth from the other planets in our solar system is the fact we have atmosphere. The moon has no atmosphere. When the astronauts went to the moon, they had to have oxygen tanks and pressure suits. And Mars has no atmosphere, or if it has an atmosphere, it's so thin that it's not the gaseous hydrogen, oxygen, and earth gas atmosphere that we have. And in the steps of creation, if step one, and this is just me talking, all right, but I'm trying to relate that to what we know of our physical world, because if the Bible is correct, then it should be verifiable as scientific evidence evolves. The Bible should hold up, and I think it does. I think some of our scientific evidence is, those conclusions are incorrect. But we've got 8 or 9 bodies floating around the sun out in space. God created, supposedly day one. But for some reason, the third planet, he chose to create with an atmosphere. We have an ozone level. And the atmosphere does exactly what it says here in verse 4, we're in day 2. We have water in the seas, and we have waters up above. We have waters in the clouds. That's the whole hydrological cycle thing. The waters in the cloud fall to the earth as rain, and rain, water evaporates, and moisture is returned back to the clouds. So it fits perfectly with what we know of scientific evidence that our atmosphere, that middle X number of thousands of feet, separates the waters below that are gathered in liquid form in the seas and the waters above that exist primarily in gaseous form up in the clouds and whatnot until they attain sufficient mass and condense to the point where they form water droplets or snow or hail or whatever it is and come crashing back down to earth in the cycle that God established. So to me, in the reading of this, the expanse God created on this planet that did indeed separate the waters below from the waters above, but also made it possible for every other step of creation. Because no other to date in our scientific findings and research, as far as we've been able to get, we've not found life anyplace else. The life exists, as far as we know it, on Earth as a result of our planet having an atmosphere.
Okay, in day 4, we get a little bit more about the expanse, and I'll go there in a moment, but on day 3, vegetation sprouted. And there's one thing, again, that I never really read: yielding seed. What do you need out of vegetation for it to yield seed? It has to be grown. A plant that you put in the ground, a seed in the ground, can't yield seed until it gets grown. So the vegetation, in my mind, was already fully grown. Because you also, it says, planting and yielding seed of their own kind. So an apple tree can't have an orange. Now you do see crossover stuff, but you don't ever see an orange apple tree. Now you can take apples and make different varieties of apples. You can do a few others. Tangerines, which is an orange and another fruit mixed together, but there's a tree that orange tree don't give you tangerines. So all the seeds and all the trees brought forth fruit of their own kind. And it says, let me see, it's the trees bearing fruit in which their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. It was evening and morning of the 3rd day. In verse 14, God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of heavens to separate the day from night, and let them be signs for seasons, for the days and years. Let them be lights in the expanse of heavens to give light upon the earth." And so it was so. God made 2 lights. The greater light ruled the day, the lesser light ruled the night. Now, what would that be? Sun and moon. So what does the moon control? The seasons. Isn't it amazing that, have you been, we were in Maine. Maine is known for very high variations in tide. And I went every morning we were there, I went to the store and got coffee, a donut or a sausage biscuit, and I sat out and I could watch this bay that was there. That was a mud flat. And all of a sudden I could be eating in it, and I'm watching and watching, all of a sudden water's coming in. And by lunchtime, it was full, almost like a 14, 15-foot variation. The moon controls the tide. And if you've ever been to Florida, you know high tide and low tide. You know when it's going out. You have to be careful because it could drag you right out with it. The tide, all these things that God put up there are very important. And sometimes we don't, well, what happens if the sun's gone? We die. Now, God had a plan, right? He had a plan.
I think it's funny. I have concern that if that's going to the moon and leaving all of our junk up there, that it's going to change the position of the moon.
It's,
I don't know, that's just something I've thought about.
we see day 5. What happened on day 5? Birds and fish. Again, God creates these creatures, each his own kind. If you know anything about evolution, or if you've ever studied evolution, or ever anybody told you, well, it's evolution that caused all this to happen. Well, they have a theory it takes so many years for one species to go to another species. You know, it can't move. It's got to evolve over there. Well, if you take all the years that it takes to do that, it also takes itself out of contention for being real, because they also have a theory if it takes more than this many years, it will never happen. So their own theory cuts itself out of the whole equation. All these creatures, who don't love watching hummingbirds? Birds. I could care less about the rest of birds. Hawks and eagles, they're cool, but a hummingbird is one of the neatest, amazing things I've ever seen. Man, they can move. They can move sideways. They can move up and down. They can dart. I mean, it is just amazing watching a hummingbird. It can hover. I don't know any other birds that can hover. I really don't. God's creation. Everyone according to their own kind. That's another thing. You know, they say, well, the Bible has open spaces. You do it. Well, okay, right here it's telling you he's created everything of its own kind. He definitely didn't create one bird, so we have the rest of the birds. Why would he? We don't have one fish that turned into 45,000 different kinds of fish. For you who like to fish, bluegill is the greatest fish ever made because it tastes good. God created all this stuff. Then in day 6, I'm going to get to day 6. God brought forth living creatures according to their own kind. It says livestock, creeping things, beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kind, and everything that creeps according to its kind. And God saw it was good. So now we're missing one thing. God's created all this stuff. God made the waters, the beautiful stars in the sky, all the things that as humans we loved to watch. We were up in Michigan earlier this summer. There's nothing more beautiful than watching the sunrise over the lake or the sunset over the lake. Those amazing things he created here. Now he needed somebody. I think the animals could care less. Some of them care less whether it's day or night. They have sleeping cycles, just like we do. But God said, let us make man. Notice, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Then this is where, because you got to get to chapter 2 before you read about the creation of man and woman together. So this is just kind of a condensed version. Then you can move on and see what else. It basically goes into the creation of man and woman again. It said, let us make, let me see, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, birds of the heavens, and the livestock, and over all the earth, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. Let them. I'm not saying that I know, but when I just read this a little bit, Eve was already here. We're going to find out how she was created. We get to this point, and I'm like, if God's created all this stuff, I'm really not going to get in an argument about how it was created. Because I already know God created it. When it was created. It was, so did it take 6,000 years? No, I don't believe that. I believe one day was one day. One of the words that I read was, it talks about how different words in Hebrew, but it was talking about the day. It had one word that can mean multiple days, unless there was a prefix that said one day, then it meant one day. And you see that in all these verses through the 6 verses, on the 6th day, on the 1st day, on the 2nd day. So there's a time slot, one day. I think, and I'm thinking it was 24 hours. It says evening and night, evening and morning were the day. It's kind of backwards to how we see it. And I'm not sure exactly where that logic or how that fills in. But when did the day start in Jewish time? 6 o'clock? And did it end at 6 o'clock? Do we know? I'm not sure either.
Is that the beginning of each day?
Yes, in the evening and the morning.
Yes. So they did it backwards too then, right? So well that's more like it. We're backwards. But backwards to what we know. And it was kind of interesting. Josh gave me a Torah concordance. It's backwards. It opens a different way. You read it a different way. So things could have been, evening could have been the start of the day. All I know is when it said one day, that's what it's meaning, one day.
No, it was dark. When he created it, darkness was first. And then he created the light, so we the next.
And there was evening and morning before there was one. Or before the sun was.
And that's interesting too, because the sun wasn't created until the 4th day. The light that was created was first day.
And vegetation was there before the sun rose.
Yes.
Figured that one out.
And I wish I could, because I looked. What I can tell you, God is the light. In him there is no darkness. So the light to me is God. God put that. He knew the fruit the plants were going to have to be there before humans got there, or before animals got there. They had to have something to eat. So we see all this stuff. The creation story, again, I'm going to end right here, and I know I'm cutting off a few things. The day, 7th day, Jesus rested. I will tell you that, but go look at Genesis again. And when you look at Genesis again, look at it with a different frame of mind. Maybe some things will jump out on the page to you. I appreciate y'all's attention. Thank you. Thank you, Greg.
I want to say God created time, space, and matter. Time is past, present, future. Space is width, depth, height. And matter is, like solid, liquid gas. You can touch it.
Yep.
So when you're talking about space, it's anything you can measure. It doesn't matter. We can measure to the moon, we can measure to the sun. We can measure up to where the planes fly. It can be measured. So I just want to add that.
No, that's good. That's good there. Because it is really interesting that all these, they only had their naked eye when they were looking. They could see the moon, but they could see stars, but they couldn't see other planets. They didn't know what was out there. And there was a story in here about Sir Isaac Newton created this thing and had the known planets at the time on this, he had it on this wheel that would make the planets do what they're supposed to do around the sun. And somebody asked him about who created that. He said, nobody. And the guy said, wait, nobody. Because the guy was a Gnostic, he didn't believe in God. Sir Isaac Newton in his story was making a point. I made it. Yeah, I made it, but I didn't make any of the stuff. I made this little machine. I didn't make anything else. I made this machine. That's kind of what I do at Ford. I make trucks. I didn't create the steel or the rubber or the anything else. The asphalt they drive on, none of that's me. All the rest of it, God did. And the only reason I'm making trucks is because God allows me to. That's it.